Hello students, this is the last part of the essay The Portrait of a Lady written by Kuswant Singh. So after this video, this chapter will be end up. So in my last video I have discussed about the second phase of their life, that is life in the city, and after starting life, city's life, how the separation grow between grandmother and grandson. And today I will discuss the last phase of the story, that is the author's return from the abroad after the 5 years. So finally what happened after completing the university studies in his own country, the narrator or the grandson went for abroad study for 5 years. So on the first day, when the narrator set up his journey for the abroad, on that particular day what happened, grandmother was still on the same age and she is still an old lady. So the author decided to go abroad for his further studies for 5 years. At that moment, the author hoped that grandmother would stop him not to go for the abroad for further studies, but nothing has happened like that, because grandmother is a very strong in her character. Though she is a old lady, very weak, and she looks like 100 years old, but she has a she has a lots of courage in her mind. She know how to passes her life with the passage of time, and she know how to take the advantage of the time, and she know how to move with the time also here. So she does not become any reason, she does not become any reason that her grandson would stop after knowing her mental or physical condition. Means she does not interrupt her grandson for not moving towards the abroad for his further studies. So she never create any difficulty, or she never complained against about all those also. But the author thought that being an old lady, this at that moment grandmother must stop him not to go abroad for 5 years, because now the grandmother is in front the door of the death, being an old lady, and that is quite natural. So at any moment grandmother may be died, death may occur to her. So it is very well known by the author here. That's why he hope for a moment like that grandmother would at least stop him for not going to the abroad. But nothing has happened like that. Instead, grandmother went along with her grandson to see of him at the railway station also. So she went to see of him. At that moment also grandmother has no time to talk with her mouth. What she did, she just go and kiss on the forehead of the author, just before bidding the goodbye to each other. So at that moment the author feel that that was the last physical contact between me and my grandmother. He felt most moist feeling at that moment. So just before bid goodbye, grandmother kisses on his forehead, but she didn't speak a single word with her grandson, and she bade goodbye like that, and she wished him good luck, good journey, without speaking a word with the jester. And like that the author went to the abroad for the 5 years. So here the story, in this paragraph what happened, the author finally returned back from the abroad after completing his abroad studies, means after 5 years. So after 5 years also what happened, before 5 years he met with her grandmother in the same station, and after 5 years also the grandmother went to the same station to receive her grandson. And on that day also grandmother has no time to spell a single word with her grandson. Instead what she did, she just go as soon as the author got down from the train. She just go nearby her grandson and she just hugged to him. So when the grandmother hugged her grandson, at that time what the grandson heard? Grandson heard only the inaudible chanting of the grandmother from her mind. So when grandson collapsed her in her arms, at that moment he heard the sound of the inaudible prayer, the chanted of the God's name at that moment. And finally what happened? They returned to the home. So after reaching at the home, what happened? In the evening especially, some changes occurred in grandmother's characteristics. Because what happened? Suddenly what happened? She collected some women from her neighborhood and took out an old drum, and she started to beat the sagging skins of the drum, and at the same time she started singing also. She just sang and beat at the drum, the dilapidated drum, the sagging skin of the dilapidated drum, and she started the singing. What type of song she sang at that moment? She sang the homecoming warrior song. So when, for example, when the two countries fight each other, at that moment, if our soldiers win over against the enemy, on their return, what the welcome song the countrymen used to sing. So in the same manner, grandmother also started singing here the homecoming warrior song. So it seems like that her grandson has win over against someone, and after winning that fight against the enemy, finally he returned at home after the 5 years. So in that manner, grandmother started singing by beating the dilapidated drum, and at the same time she collected some women also. She was over excited on that particular day, and her excitement here shows what? How much she was happy on the return of her grandson here. Though she didn't talk with her grandson, though she has no word, because she was all the time chanted the God name, but finally what happened? That changes is enough to us, that the changes was enough to prove that how emotionally she was connected with her grandson, how much she loved her grandson. After all, only on that particular evening she forget to chant the God's name. The lady whom the author has seen since the last 20 years, all the time she was praying. All the time she used to chant the beads. She used to count the beads and chanted the God's name. But on that particular moment, what happened? On that particular evening, she just forget to chant the God name, and she enjoyed herself a lot by singing and dancing and by beating the drum with the women, some women of her neighborhood. Only for what? Only to celebrate the homecoming of her grandson after the 5 years. So after that incident, what happened? Now it's time come for grandmother to close her last chapter of life. You see how pathetic. In the evening, what happened? She became excited on her grandson return. So when she was overexcited with happiness, at that moment the family member stop him not to be that much excite him that, but she didn't listen anyone. She just continued singing, dancing and beating the drum. In that way she spent her the most happiness moment after the 5 years. So next morning what happened? Suddenly what happened? A mild fever started with grandmother. She was suffering with the fever. So at that moment the family member called the doctor to check up her, because after all she is sick with the fever here. So the doctor came and checked up and informed to the family member that it is just a mild fever. That fever will go very soon. So after saying so, by giving the medicine, the doctor left out. But grandmother took it differently. She told the family member that her end is near. So as she told, the family member approached to talk with her, because it's a human it's a natural character of human being that if we come to know that someone is going to leave the world at that moment, all the family member wanted to talk with that person particularly. So that's why family member protested to talk with grandmother, but grandmother refused to talk with the family member. So in that way, grandmother behaved very odd with the family member just before end of her life. So what she replied to the family member when they protested to talk, she said that her end is very near. So before closing the last chapter of her life, she wanted to give the complete time, all the time, only to the God. Because on yesterday's evening, what happened? She forgot about to chant the God name due to her overexcitement on her grandson return. Now she wanted to make up that particular time which she had spent without chanting the God name. So before closing my last chapter, I wanted to omit only the God's name. I wanted to chant only the God's name. So she refused to talk with the family member. Just before suspecting anyone, suddenly what happened? The beads of the rosary fell from grandmother's hand after laying on the bed. So grandmother peacefully lay on the bed and she started to chant the God name by counting the beads of rosary. And suddenly what happened? Before the suspecting of the family member, that beads of the rosary fall down from grandmother's hand, and suddenly what happened? A piece. Grandmother, first of all, grandmother lips stopped moving, and suddenly she just closed her eyes and a peace has expressed from her face. It seems like that she was sleeping a very peaceful sleep. It's like that. And then the family member came to know that grandmother is no more. She is died. So finally what happened? The grandmother was died. So after her died, what happened? Being a customary, grandmother was taken down on the floor and she was covered with a red shroud. So, and after mourning a few moments with the family member, now they are engaged themselves with for the last funeral, that is cremation of grandmother. So when they were engaged themselves to maintain the other formality, at that moment what happened? Thousands of sparrows arrived where grandmother's dead body was covered with the red shroud. So at that moment what happened? The sun was almost going to be set. So yellow blaze, yellow colors ray of the sunlight entered through the window, even on the verandas also. So thousands of sparrows come there to mourn on the death of the grandmother. After all, grandmother has a good bond with the sparrows also here. They are the good friends to each other. So when they came to know that their good friends is no more at that moment, they came to mourn on the death of grandmother. So though there were present thousands of sparrows, but not a single chirping sound produced there. There was no chirping sound. Every birds, by not producing the chirping sound of their actual, it shows that how they were broken, how they felt sorry, how they mourned on the death of the grandmother. And after observing the activities of the sparrows, the author's mother threw some crumbs by breaking the pieces of the bread in a small piece and threw them as the grandmother used to do. But what happened? The sparrows did not notice about the throwing crumbs. Instead, what happened? When the family member returned with the stretcher to carry the dead body of the grandmother, so as soon as what happened, they carried away the grandmother's dead body for the cremation. So right moment what happened? All the 1,000 sparrows flew away quietly without producing a single sound. So in short, the sparrows mourned very heartily, very deeply. So they were very sorry, they were very sad on the death of the grandmother, and it is shown and it is proved from the action which the sparrows has shown. So though they cannot express their sorrow through their mouth, but their action is enough that how much they were sorry on the death of grandmother. And next morning what happened? The sweeper came and swept away all the crumbs which were thrown by the mother of the author, and the story ended up like that. So this is the end of the story, and I hope you understand. Again, the story is about what? The story is a loving tribute from one grandson to his grandmother. So it is a portrait, or it is a life characteristics of grandmother. So from the whole story we come to know that grandmother is an old woman. She looks near about 100 years old. She is fatty, slightly bent. Her whole body was crisscrossed by wrinkles. Instead, she is a very religious lady. All the time she used to count the beads of the rosary, and at the same time her lips always busy with inaudible prayer of God. So she is very strong in character. She is a very religious woman. She is a very caring woman. So the author was brought up under the tender care of grandmother in the village. They have the good bond of friendship. But with the passage of the time, what happened? They are unable to give each other the time. But it doesn't mean that they don't love each other. They have no emotionally connected. They have no physically connected. It doesn't mean like that, which is proved in the story. So in city, what happened? Though some separation created between them, but grandmother always encouraged. She is always interested to know about her grandson. And when her grandson started to live in the separate room, at that moment also she know how to engage herself. So she busied herself by chanting the God name from sunrise to sunset. And even when the author went to the abroad for 5 years for his further studies, at that moment also she didn't interrupt, or she didn't stop the author not to go, not to take the higher studies, because though she is a typical village woman, though she belongs to the old tradition or old age, but she never stopped her grandson to take the modern advantages, or to be a modern man, being the demand of the time. So she adjusted in every way. And after returning from the abroad, so when the author returned from the abroad on that particular day, she was overexcited, and that overexcitement is again another one enough proof to us that how much she was happy, and still at the end of her life, how she loved her grandson, though she didn't talk to him. Though her stopping talking with grandson, it doesn't mean that she does not love to her grandson. The separation has separated from her totally. When still in her life, grandmother for her grandmother, the same tender care and then the same love remained the same. So their friendship remained the same. Though they cannot show each other, but internally their love for each other never erasing. It's remained the same. So at the end of the story, grandmother was died, and on the death of the grandmother, not only the family members were sad, even the other creatures like the animal also felt very sorry on the death of the grandmother. So the situation is very pathetic for the family member as well as for the other creatures also. So like that the story end up. I hope now you understand. So you once read out the story, then you will understand more better. So I hope this video will help you to cover up your syllabus, and thank you for today. So on my next video I will discuss another one point from your same syllabus. Thank you.